So the first one that we're going to do is a flat wash. Okay, so this is really, really nice and simple. So what I've actually done is I've taken my piece of paper and I've taped it down onto a board because sometimes when we're doing skies, we're going to need to lift the paper up and we're going to need to kind of move it around. So if you can kind of maybe tape your paper down, it's actually quite a good idea. Also with doing a flat wash, I'm going to use my glasses case actually, and I'm just going to tip the paper up so that the paint kind of flows down. What I've also done already is actually I've mixed up a nice kind of watery mix of colour. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is mix up enough so that it covers the whole page. Okay, what you don't want to do in the middle of a wash is suddenly think, oh gosh, I haven't made enough, and then you're going to have to stop and make some more, and then the flat wash is not going to work so well. Okay, so make sure you've got enough to be able to do the whole wash. Okay, so we're just going to start at the top. We're going to take our brush across. So I'm using my lovely flat wash brush, my lovely oval brush, which holds a huge amount of water. So already you can see what's happening with the flat wash is that it's creating a bead of paint. So all I'm doing is kind of just touching that bead and I'm moving that down. Okay, I'm never ever going to go back up into here. Okay, I'm always going to go back in, pick up some more paint, and then touch that bead and just move down to the next level. Okay, so taking some more paint, touching that bead and making that kind of move down. Okay. And what I want you to do is to try and resist the temptation to then go back and start touching the edge of the paper, or kind of going back in and thinking, oh gosh, I need to put something here or whatever. Just leave that now alone. And that is your lovely kind of flat wash. Okay, so I will just leave that to one side and let it dry. So for this one, we are going to be doing the lifting out technique. Okay, so what you will need is cobalt blue and your cerulean blue. So what I've done is I've already kind of got these washes all ready to go and mixed up in my palette here. You will also need a tissue for the lifting out. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is actually just wet the paper, and this just really helps the wash to kind of go down quite evenly. So when you're wetting the paper, just make sure that it is nice and even. Make sure the edges are wet as well, because that's the one place I find it dries out quicker. Okay, so you don't want any puddles of water, you just want it to be nice and flat. Okay, so because we've already got water on our paper, the mixes that I've got are slightly stronger than normal, I suppose. So a little bit less water, more pigment. So you can see they're not as kind of thin, because obviously we've got that the wetness of the paper already, added to which when they dry, they will dry a lot lighter. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the cobalt blue at the top and then bring in the cerulean as we go down to the bottom. Okay, so we're just going to put that down first. And you can see it sort of starts to kind of move and create a nice kind of even mix. So I'm just bringing the cerulean as we go down. Make sure it goes up to the edges. Okay, that will do. So next we take our tissue and we can just scrunch that up. Okay, so create a nice little ball. And then we are literally just going to start lifting out our clouds. Now you can kind of just you can either look out the window and see what you can see in terms of the clouds, or you can just make this up, you know, as long as they kind of look cloud-like. I think it will be fine. Okay. So obviously the harder you press, the stronger, you know, the more you're lifting out and the more kind of white of the cloud. So in terms of kind of modelling, you know, for example, the light might be coming in one direction. So you want to, the tops of the clouds are obviously going to be lighter and the lower parts will have a lot more kind of shadow in them. So that's what you need to kind of perhaps think about when you're doing this. So a lot harder pressing down at the top and perhaps a little bit lighter as you kind of go down. Okay, maybe there's something else there as well. Okay. Yeah, okay, so I'm quite happy with that, and I'm just going to leave it there. What I'm also going to show you is perhaps kind of adding a little bit of a kind of shadow underneath the clouds as well. So, you know, you can just leave this like this and it's done. Okay, you've got a lovely sort of cloudy sky here. But if you want to add a little bit more shadow in them using a kind of mixture of a grey, what you need to do is allow this to fully dry. And then we'll kind of do the next stage. So I'm going to just turn the filming off, let this dry, and then I'll come back and do the second part. So for the second part of this, to add the shadows, we are going to be introducing burnt sienna into the mix. So what I've got in here is the cobalt blue plus a little bit of the burnt sienna to make my grey colour here. Okay, so you can see that there. You can also add a touch of the alizarin in there, but it's entirely up to you. I'm just going to stick to those two colours, but you can experiment with that. Okay. So we're just going to take a small section at a time, and we are just going to add a little bit of kind of wet into wet. So the edge of the cloud, we're going to kind of try to avoid any water on there, and we're just going to wet perhaps a kind of smaller area sort of underneath this cloud here. Okay, so I've just gone over. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little bit of my my shadow colour, and perhaps I'm just going to do this with a slightly smaller brush so that I can control it better. So I'm just dropping down a brush, and I'm just going to drop that shadow colour into the kind of bottom of the cloud there, and I'm just going to kind of let it run and kind of do its thing. You know, I might just kind of coax it along a little bit. Okay, and therefore I'm kind of just adding just a little bit of kind of shadow underneath that cloud. Okay, so it's kind of as easy as that, I suppose. And you can just kind of play around with it until you've got it kind of looking right and how you want it. So what I would do is then I would go on and do the rest of that as well. So I just want to show you that you can add shadow onto this type of effect when you've just been lifting out. Okay, so just to recap, you just wet a part of the cloud and then drop your colour in. So for the next one, we're going to do a kind of a wet on dry kind of technique. And so for this, we're going to be using, again, the cobalt blue, and we're going to be using a little bit of the raw sienna as well. Okay, so we're going to start off by, we're going to kind of wet the paper, but we're not going to wet all of it. So, you know, sometimes it's quite nice to sort of leave sort of areas of sort of dry paper. So the paint will kind of move in, you know, the areas where it's wet, and where it's dried, it's obviously not going to go there. So I'm leaving gaps of kind of dry paper. Okay, so I'm just going to then start sort of dropping the paint in. Okay, and this, I have to admit, this is sort of one of my favourite ways of sort of doing skies, because I quite like the soft and the hard edges. And it's also a little bit sort of more kind of unpredictable in terms of sort of what's going to happen with it. Let's just try and bleed that bit off. And so when it comes down to the bottom part, I'm just going to use a little bit of that raw sienna at the bottom. Use a little bit of it up here. So I'm just kind of lifting out with the brush, actually, just to create some nice kind of cloud, softer kind of cloud shapes. You know, just making and sculpting them really. Just soften that a little bit there, it looks a bit harsh. So you can see I've really kind of taken all the water out of this brush, and it's, you know, I'm just, you know, using it very, very dry and letting it soften some of those edges. So this is lovely. I mean, I love this technique because you've got these lovely, lovely soft edges and some kind of harsh little bits, harsh edges kind of appearing now as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll add some more kind of shadow onto that. Okay, so what I've done is I've dried that off. Okay, so that's all nice and dried. And again, I'm using my neutral tint. So that's again using the cobalt blue, light red, and a little bit of the alizarin crimson in there as well. Okay, so I'm just going to adjust that and make sure it's all correct. The main thing about this is actually just to get your washes ready before you start applying any paint down. So that is the most important part of this, because you don't want to then start mixing your colours. It's a little bit too wet. I'm just going to dry that off a little bit. Okay, so once I've got some kind of colour down, I'm going to use just water just to then soften those edges down. Rinsing my brush, just taking excess water off. And you can see again, I'm like using a very, very sort of dry brush and just, you know, letting it just kind of do whatever, this kind of odd shape. Okay, I'm just then sort of just building up. I'm going to leave some of the layers that I can see underneath, and I'm just going to maybe just adjust it so that it's a little bit warmer towards the bottom. Okay, so again I've kind of put a little band of clouds, and then I'm just, again, just softening. Okay. Can even kind of enhance some of the blues. And connect that up to there. So at this stage, all I'm doing is kind of really kind of looking and seeing what it needs really, and just kind of balancing the hard and the kind of soft edges. Maybe it's a little bit more kind of blue down here. So all the time I'm kind of working in that kind of motion. There's a little bit of an odd shape there. A little bit of an odd one there. Right, okay. So yeah, once again, I'm quite happy with that. And I'm just going to leave it there.